Corona TV viewers. I'm Johnny Damon.
You're my bobblehead Joel today, just nod up and down if you agree. Welcome to the show, Mitch Joel. How are you?
Happy birthday to you.
And just look at those washboard abs.
I know, right? Oh yeah, this is the fittest I've ever been in my life, you know.
Happy birthday from Johnny Damon.
First of all, let's just do the elbow bump. Well, welcome everybody. It is Monday. It is the Monday of Thanksgiving, and I am thankful for you. I'm thankful for Corona TV. I'm thankful for every single breath of mine, and I'm also thankful for espresso. I'm very thankful for coffee. Today is National Espresso Day. I've been calling it, I realized probably until about 2 or 3 years ago, I called it espresso. Don't know why. Maybe it's a South African thing. I was going to actually have an espresso with me, but I forgot. I got so excited because of my guest today, Max Lenderman, and you'll be finding out more about him shortly. I can't wait for him to come on the show. Mr. Tom Morris is here. Happy Monday. I'm thankful for the show, and I'm thankful for you, Tom. I'm thankful for my guest. Tom was my guest. For those of you that don't know, you always see Tom Morris. He was one of my guests on the show, and then he came on over to the after show, and he hasn't left yet. He does not leave the Zoom after show. I'm pretty sure that he actually has never logged off in about 3 months, and he's become a regular. Chip says he needs to go downstairs to get himself an espresso. Get me an espresso to add to your espresso. I'm glad that Chip is here as well. I want to take this moment to just acknowledge a very, very special person in this world, and not just a special person, but I think the passing, unfortunately, of a special person. Pat Quinn was the founder of one of the greatest viral crazes. I mean, it probably gave, opened up this concept of, everything from Movember and all of these viral types of social, lubricated events. This is the Ice Bucket Challenge. Pat, unfortunately, passed away with the condition that the Ice Bucket Challenge was designed to promote awareness of and raise money for ALS. And I managed to go back into the archives and find this little clip from the Ice Bucket Challenge. It's my son doing it.
Justin for nominating me for the Ice Bucket Challenge. I nominate Matthew Savoca, Weston Hawkhauser, and Guidon Titel.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Oh. Can I go in the hot tub now?
Now, that's definitely the first world version of the Ice Bucket Challenge. Can I go in the hot tub now? But I did it. I actually challenged Mitch Joel to do it, who you saw in the opening credits. Mitch is actually going to be on the show on Wednesday. So it's funny how things kind of all move around. And things are all connected. We are all truly connected. And so I just want to say to Pat, rest in peace, and just know that you leave behind an incredible legacy and a true inspiration to every single person on this planet. Well, we go from, as we always do, from the sublime to the ridiculous. My fat blogging. So I put on weight again. I can't seem to break through this threshold, back up to 183.4 pounds. You can see that I'm kind of, plateauing, and I feel I am going to need to get exercise back in my life in order to continue weight loss. If in fact I need to, maybe this is just what my weight is meant to be, and 20 pounds down during 2020, I think it's got to be. I hope it is good enough. Well, this week's interviews, we start off with Max Lenderman today, Lisa Cohn tomorrow. We'll hear all about her unbelievable story of how she grew up existing and being part of a cult, and how she broke free of that, and what her life is like today, and what she's chosen to do with her life. Just before I get into Corona Community, which will be on Wednesday, I'm now pleased to tell you that we're fully booked until the end of 2020. So screw you, 2020. I'm now taking on bookings already mid-January 2021. So we are fully booked until about mid-January 21. Unbelievable to think that at the end of this year, 200 interviews later, Corona TV is going strong. And on Wednesday, you're going to hear from Mark Schaefer, Martin Albarda, Leslie Laredo, Laura Gassner-Otting, Mitch Joel, Bob Farnham, Faith James, Bruce Turkel, and Mike Lipkin. It's going to be a humdinger, as is today, once you meet the wonderful Max Lenderman, founder, author, and creative person in general. Well, let's get into our seated soliloquy. And our seated soliloquy today, or my seated soliloquy today, is aptly titled Fatigue. We're all tired. We've had enough. Our nerves are frayed and we're on edge. Over the past weekend, I went for a walk with my wife and Sammy. And for those of you who are new to the show, Sammy is my Morkie. About half a mile into the walk, we received some pretty bad news. And just to manage expectations, no one is sick, no one died. But it was bad news. So we turned around immediately and we headed back to the car. As we were walking, a jogger ran past us and our dog got in her way. She reacted pretty harshly. Dude, what the? My response was, it's okay. It was a mistake. You don't have to overreact. Karen continued to overact. Okay, I'm kidding. I don't know what her name was. At that moment, a couple walked past and the guy took it upon himself to get involved in our business. She's right, you know, it's your dog and you're supposed to control him on leash. I proceeded to tell him politely to butt out, but he persisted. And so I told him what he could do to himself. And then I told him what I would do to him if he continued. Look, you could say I overreacted as well, just a little bit. I felt awful. I don't like myself when I explode like that. I also don't like shying away from a confrontation, especially when I feel that I've been wronged. Still, I want to be better, and I want to be able to rise up beyond the emotions of these kinds of situations. I'm reminded by this sage piece of advice, which most likely was probably given or discussed over the course of the past 8 months on Corona TV. People are naturally good. They are naturally kind. When they react in a negative way, consider what is going on in their lives. What caused or prompted them to react that way in the first place? Female jogger and male walker had no idea about the news that I just received, but then again, I had no idea what was going on in male walker's life or what prompted female jogger to hit the trail in 45-degree weather either. All of us did have one thing in common though. The past 8 months, COVID, quarantine, isolation, loneliness, Black Lives Matter, the election, homeschooling, job loss. I can't go back in time, but I can work on myself. The fatigue of current times and the next potentially explosive situation, or maybe I should say the next situation that is not explosive. I can be better and I will be better. Now it's time to get into our guest and to welcome him on. But before we do that, of course, I want to just quickly say happy birthday to all my friends, Mr. Evan Kossoff and Chris Brown, Rashid Patel, Ruby Gottlieb, David Umbrecht, a Wolves fan. You'll know why I'm saying that in a moment. Lasia Palmer, don't want to forget about you. And then on LinkedIn, Mayon Seidel, Noah, Duncan. Let's just get through you guys quickly. I hate to rush through you, but I need to because I need to bring on Max onto the show. Max has been a leader as a chief creative officer and CEO at some of the largest and most awarded marketing and advertising agencies in the world, like GMR Marketing, Crispin Porter and Bogeski, and Project Worldwide. He's the author of 2 acclaimed books, publishes a marketing zine called Camus, or maybe I pronounced it wrong, we'll see, writes regularly for Adweek, and lectures at the University of Colorado, Solvay School of Business, and Denver Ad School. He's a little bit of a rock star, and I can't wait for him to come on. So let's bring him on. Welcome, Max.
Oh, hey, Joseph. Thank you. What an intro. Hey, before we get into it, I just wanted to comment on your soliloquy, and I couldn't agree more. I found that, you know, what COVID and Corona has done for many of us, right, is taken us out of places where there's lots of people. And I remember a few years back, my dad was going through some health issues, and there was a very tumultuous, emotional, crazy time. And I would be going through the airport, and I'd be stuck in my, you know, my depression, if you will, my kind of like angst, my existential questioning. And you look up and you realize that every single person at this airport has similar feelings, has a, you know, an issue, has a loved one that's struggling, is struggling themselves, every single one. And I would use my travel time as like an empathy petri dish, you know, of like really kind of stepping out of yourself, because that's what really it takes, and just recognizing how we're all connected, to your point. And it's the one thing I miss about COVID. Not the getting on the planes, not the delays, not the, you know, walking into the same exact hotel room that could be anywhere and waking up and asking yourself, what town am I in? But it's that connection, that empathy petri dish that I really miss, because it's the best reminder in the world of just how connected we are. So it's amazing that you bring this up, because I was just thinking about this yesterday, about what I really miss. And that's one of the biggest things I really do miss about not being out there as much.
And it's funny because, you know, I've had the ability through community, through people that watch regularly, or people that are new to the show, to create a different type of set or suite of connections. But going back to what you were saying, I mean, it really struck me that every person on this planet has actually the same thing in common. Now, we could have said, what did we have in common before COVID? We could have just said, well, we're humans, or like, what else would have connected every single person on this planet at the same time? And with that, you know, it's almost like a tree, it branches out into, you know, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical health, whether it's, you know, job loss, whether it's food insecurity. It can get quite specific too. But, you know, I mean, I was weak this past weekend. I've tried to be strong, but I'm human too. So I got pissed off as well, you know, and it actually felt quite good as well to tell him what he could do with himself, because I needed the release, but then I immediately felt pretty crap about it too. And you know, and part of the growth is to say, let's not do that again.
Well, and I would also venture to say that part of the vulnerability is you sharing it with everyone right now, right? And being vulnerable about it, and have the self-reflection about it, and go on. I think one of the greatest things, and I think you kind of alluded to it, is self-permission as well, right? Like the permission to F up. You know, the ability to try new things doesn't come without the, you know, the possibility and all for the probability of a major fuck up, pardon my French. And so you kind of have to develop the permission skills as well, like self-permission to go there, as long as you totally have the awareness to go with it. It's, you know, it's not a one-way street. But yeah, you know, I think the connection that we're all finding ourselves in have very similar kind of tangents to what you mentioned, like mortality or existentialism, or, you know, transformation. Let's just call it that. Like, you know, this desire to collectively, despite the divisiveness in politics and, you know, geo divisions, etc., but this connectedness to find something more out of our lives, maybe, or our relationships. And we all share the exact same thing on this planet. Never in our lifetime have we shared, you know, a common through line. You know, it's a creative strategist wet dream. in order to jump into this, collective consciousness that's being developed right now. And it's fascinating what comes out of that, right? What kind of transformative, beneficial, socially impactful or not, things that come out of this collective consciousness that we're in. It's amazing.
I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking that phrase, "a creative person's wet dream." That's gold, Jerry. That's gold.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting, also as a planner. You're a creative. I'm a planner. How, when to unite everyone and say we're all in this together, right? And when to be able to say the worst thing we can do is to just put everybody, into this giant petri dish that is the earth, and sometimes it's going to apply, and sometimes it's going to, it will backfire, as we've seen with so many brands.
Yeah, and it's an interesting kind of yin yang situation about what people are thinking about. Marketers in general are talking about personalization, right? Like there's so much metadata and micro data that goes into, and I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma, but it seems to have roughed and opened some some hoods and some skirts, but just the ability to pinpoint and deliver something and use an algorithm to basically know before it's sent to you that it'll trigger some sort of response. It's considered this like panacea of personalization. And then when people start talking about, well, once AI comes in, it's going to be even great. It's going to be amazing. And it's the most dehumanizing personalization in the history of mankind, right? It is so micro, it is so specific, it is so artificial that it misses the other side of the personalization coin, which I think carries the empathy weight, right? The consciousness weight, the purpose weight, all the other things that we think about when we talk about, collective or cultural consciousness. And it's really interesting who's going to be occupying that space, because the ad tech guys are going to slice and dice until the cows come home. But what's the other side of that coin that's really interesting, right? Like, how do you develop empathy at scale and call that personalization, in the same way that all these marketers have developed all these nefarious tools to create, targeting at scale or personalization at scale, and they're calling it personalization. With everything, there's this rebound effect, and I think the deeper we go into the micro, I think we also have to look at the macro. And lots of times, whether it's promotional cycles or marketing budgets or just quarterly, financial performance that needs to be taken care of, the macro perception or point of view gets short shrift, and the default goes into this micro, and it's a very kind of like dehumanizing, unflattering way of going about doing marketing, which is why I love Experiential, because I don't think it gets to that kind of granularity, and it kind of plays more on the emotional and the memorable rather than the tactical.
Well, I feel, and I am able to jump around in this conversation and be as non-linear as I possibly can be. That you're talking to something to your vision right now, and what is to be your third book. So we'll jump into your third book versus the first or second. We'll get back there, but the book is, not only do we know what the book might be called, but we actually have a really, really good idea what the cover of the book is going to look like. So I'm going to do a bit of a worldwide scoop here, which is it is. There's the new book. It's called Start With Who by the one and the only Max Lenderman. And by the way, none of this might even be true. But it does come down to something that I think you feel very, very strongly about, which is that marketing will need to be driven by empathy at scale for people, communities, and society. So I love it. I mean, I love, instead of start with why, start with who. What do you want to tell us about potentially this book or non-book, this cover or non-cover, but ultimately this idea of how do you define this empathy at scale?
I don't know is the short answer, but I'll try it. It's all a miasma of how we were talking about connection points and synapses and whatnot. But it kind of requires a parenthetical, so bear with me. The past 7 years, I was running I founded and ran an agency called School, and we were incredibly influenced by Simon Sinek and Start With Why. And the reason is we really did, and still do to a certain extent, believe that it was the window into what we now are terming brand purpose or purpose marketing. It was a deeper question, and a kind of defendable deeper question that consultancies and agencies and strategists could start asking in order to get to answering that question of, why are you in business? If it wasn't for making profit, if it wasn't for shareholder value, why are you in business? And we tried that out earlier in our new business pitches, and the CMOs that we were in front of were not happy to answer that question. It's a hard question to answer. And so Start With Why has been somewhat of a North Star, right? And a super valuable one in order to get to like what we see as brands getting to their purpose, right? And articulating it in culture. And we were working on that as well. And then you see kind of cracks in that the people that these messages or these campaigns were being aimed at, sure, they share the same values, but it was kind of like a crapshoot. It became more of a marketing thing than an actual intentional reformulation of your business or retransformation of why you're in business. It just sort of became a better strategy perspective than a real business transformation tool. And at the same time, to continue the parenthetical, as you know, I've been incredibly interested and a big kind of proponent of live experiential based marketing, because to me, as being someone who's been in agencies and done TV campaigns and radio and billboard or whatever, experiential has always been that place where you can't really bullshit people, pardon my French, right? You see reactions, you see kind of like immediate visceral acceptance or not, you see complete indifference as they walk by. Like, it's this petri dish, a focus group right in front of your eyes. And I've always wanted to marry that, right? I wanted to marry the power of that memorable, visceral, potentially transformative moment in time that a brand or a company can give to someone, right? With the purpose. So that transformation leads to a social impact, a positive social impact, or a better conversation at the dinner table, or healthier thoughts on the drive to work, right? I always wanted to marry it. And I thought that the friction was the way that we understood people, the way, like what motivates people, right? And this delusion that marketers typically have, as more so than not affluent, that their empathetic muscles must be the same as the empathetic muscles of the Burger King customer or the Amazon Prime customer, right? There's a disconnect in between the two. And that's where like I started going with, well, if we ask the why, we should be really asking about the who. And it's not a demographic or a psychographic. It's really getting into the empathetic understanding of people that is missing in this equation that connects purpose with experience that leads to transformation. And so I'm nerding out on strategy and demographics and new ways of focus grouping. The original intention was, I was like, how do marketers what's the best way to communicate? Like, I wanted to talk to NFL football coaches to understand how teams can basically take a highly complex experience and distill it into 4 words in 5 seconds, and everyone understands what's going on. And then it just led to this conversation around, we don't really understand people as much as we think we do. And it's been completely validated 2 weeks ago, and continues to be. And it was in 2016 when pollsters got it wrong. And then they reformulated everything that they needed to in terms of getting it wrong. And then they got it wrong again. And then like this, and so it just begs the question of like, do we really understand what we're doing, both for ourselves as introspective marketers, which we need to have and see, call bullshit on ourselves, but also for our audiences. and how do we communicate and get together and create, better communities and societies and people, like I said, through an empathy lens rather than through necessarily a statistical or demographical one.
I think you're onto something really big with this book idea. And first of all, just to let you know, this is a French-speaking show, so you don't need to pardon your French at all, because this is a French. We are actually speaking the native French, tongue right now. So, but I actually think what I love about it is, well, 2 points, right? Just to work backwards from what you said. First of all, we're going to look at this election and be able to say, 78 to 72 million. I mean, it's a big chunk. It's a big chunk of people. And one way is to look at it and say, why? Why did they vote? Why did as many people vote X? And why did as many people vote Y? But then there's a massive who. And boy, oh boy, is it a mistake to treat them all the same. And not to be able to segment. So I'm going to give you an idea, which is just really inspired by you. We had demographics, then we had psychographics, but now in the new book, Max Lenderman pioneered the concept of empographics. So
it sells itself. It sells itself.
Doesn't it? No, but empographics would be the segmentation of of emotions, of intentions, of motivations, of, understanding people, as opposed to old or young, black or white, thin or fat, conservative or liberal, or even attitudes, opinions, AIOs, right? Attitudes, interests, and opinions. There's something much more deep-seated than it almost sounds cold and superficial, right? Attitudes, interests, opinions. There's something much deeper that is much more powerful, and I think that's what you're getting to.
Yeah, I think so. And thank you for empographics, because I think in a sense that there's, for instance, empathy and motivations and interests, whatever, they're super fluid, right? Like to your point, like, you were walking your dog and then things happened and things changed and dynamics were heightened, and your own reaction to it and then your own self-reflection over your reaction to it has led to reconfigurations and reassessments and potential different things. It is so it's so filled with hubris to pinpoint something in a human being and say that there, what like this is going to happen for the next year. Or when we spoke to them, that we completely negate everything that occurred between the first time we spoke to someone and the second time, right? It seems to be that there's a lack of self-awareness in the same way that there needs to be this flexing of self-awareness skills in order to become more empathetic. There's a deep lack of self-awareness in the marketing and advertising industry. However, I think, in the web 2.0 with 5G coming in and the, the Twitches of the world and kind of like the AI that accompanies it, I think there is a way to start to quantify, if not qualify, empathy, right? I think there will be a way to do this in terms of, not to, to use your term, make it a little bit colder, but it would have to be from a completely different lens or perspective than the way it is now. And I think the anthropological approach to how we try to understand each other is outdated, right? It's an approach, it's a methodology that was developed before telephones, right? And so like that methodology, in order to really figure out the empographic nature of people, would have to have new technology attached to it. It can't be done as it is now.
And suddenly, just to kind of add one more build on it, it might be interesting to reflect on the election and say this was a referendum on empathy, and one side had oodles and noodles of it, and one probably had none of it. But how do you explain the 51 to 48? And the answer is it's a work in progress. It's not actually binary on or off. It's actually more of of learning to, we're on this journey, and potentially it's being able to understand how to keep moving, because empathy isn't, empathy is a journey. Empathy is not a destination.
Totally. So and that's a huge one, right? Because it's, it requires a particular empathy. I'm saying, like, it requires a certain vulnerability to let go of control, right? Or to roll with it, so to speak, like to be on this journey, as you say. Whereas a lot of the constructs and the modus operandi around marketing and advertising is actually trying to reduce variability and to have as much control and to elicit a probable to the 95th percentile response from a message or an offer or whatever, an experience even. It really does try to control the ecosystem, the human ecosystem, for one goal and one goal only, to a certain extent, is to make a sale, right? But this kind of approach, and I think Experiential has more aperture for lack of control in the experience or in the message or in the communication or in the engagement. And that, I think, is scary for a lot of traditional marketers and advertisers who and CMOs who want 1.5 on each $1 spent, right, at the minimum. So this vulnerability or acceptance of not control is a huge hurdle to overcome in the industry in general, in order to kind of allow for that, the yin to the yang, to blossom, to occur.
So Max, you have fantastic thoughts and your thinking just on brands and branding in general, I find to be, so original, fresh, and visionary. And one of the things that I love that you say is this idea that brands are verbs. And before you comment on that, the actual link on your website on brands or verbs links to this 2016 article. How ironic is this? It's a 2016 article that you are quoted in, but just look at the bottom, how sublime that is.
Wow.
Viral moments like the Ice Bucket Challenge and Black Lives Matter remind us ... I mean, that to me is just I mean, it's too coincidental not to be meant to be. That 4 years ago, this connection was there, saying these are the things that actually matter or will matter in life. So talk a little bit about what do you mean by brands or verbs?
As an experientialist, I've always just been enthralled, right? I've been enthralled by the power of theater, live music, amazing kind of like engagement moments, right? And if it just so happened to have a brand attached to it, great, right? And I would appreciate, as a young person growing up, the badge value of brands that did stuff rather than said stuff more, right? Like the Red Bulls of the world, right? Or the Vans, right? Like way early on, like Vans Warped Tour was a huge progenitor of the things that we see now in the experiential world, right? And Red Bull, up until maybe 5-6 years ago, never had a commercial. They would create the Flugtag and the ice races, and eventually culminating in jumping out of space. They just did shit, and it was so refreshing and cool to see that. And I think that the notion that brands are verbs really started out with the experiential aspect of the marketing, as like it's the show don't tell, the engagement versus the kind of like the one-way communication bullhorn that a lot of companies still use, but we're really using at the end. But it's now, in the past 5 or 6 years, taken on a little bit deeper meaning, in that people expect brands to be active players in the benefit of their lives, right? Or in the kind of ascension of higher values in our society, for instance, right? And so the being active in culture is now almost table stakes, right? Like the megaphone is way too fragmented, and no one gives a shit. And at the same time, there's a demand for action rather than words, right? And we see that, a lot of, like, I think Edelman puts out the brand trust report, and a few others, where cultural trust in institutions like government or media is going down, and cultural trust in brands is going up, right? So the fact that Nike can put out the Colin Kaepernick ad, right, which on the face of it is a billboard and a TV commercial and a print ad, is really a call to action, right, and a support of it. So a lot of what I would say marketing and advertising is experiential by its nature, because the brand behind it sees itself as a verb brand rather than a noun brand.
I really love this idea of being active in culture, and I think we spoke about this, at least the question was asked, from the Me Too movement, to Black Lives Matter, whatever the case may be. But the question was, is this a moment or a movement? And I think for brands to be active in culture, they have a better chance of creating, as you say, movements versus moments. And arguably, they don't do a very good job at even creating moments. So moments is the table stakes, and they kind of suck at that at the best of times. But what we have to aspire to, I guess, is the movement.
That's a perfect way to encapsulate it, right? And the way that I think movements work, and I'm no Noam Chomsky buff, and I'm not an anthropologist, but the best movements are the so-called big tent movements, right? And not to wax poetic, but that does require a ton of empathy, right? To actually, the movement requires empathy. Moment requires timing, right? And so this kind of, like, again, the compulsion to view everything as a controlled ecosystem, whether it's a marketing campaign or a brand positioning, or a $1 million commitment to a national or international health organization, whatever that may be, right? That's a moment in time, like you said, that's based on, well, timing and opportunity. But I think where we need to shift is movement through time, right? And it's not dependent on, kind of like, it's dependent on more proactivity than reactivity. And I think what's driving the proactivity and what can get people to coalesce around a movement rather than just a sliver is empathy, right? And I think this is being echoed in younger than us. Sorry to say, Joseph, younger than us, and in some of the
Younger than 20?
Yeah,
I don't understand.
yeah. I mean, I have a portrait.
I think I met you for the first time 20 years ago.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. But I just see this in some of the the newer agencies that are coming out, like some of the work that's being put out. I think younger people truly understand this power of connectivity and empathy, and kind of like a filter of goodness. To your earlier point, I do also believe that human beings are inherently good, right? I just think that it's a lot easier to get people to notice things when human beings are acting bad, right? And I think marketers and advertisers understand this, right? Whether they admit it wholeheartedly or not. But I think the younger generation has an inherent, radar for goodness, and it would be good to listen to that and
I can't stop smiling because first of all, I got this little programmable easy button, and I've been trying to figure out what I want to put on it, but I now figured out what I want to put on it, which is if I can find the audio clip. That's gold, Jerry, gold. Because I was like pressing it 1,000 times. That was one of the most brilliant statements I've ever heard in my life. Seriously, like this idea that movements require empathy, moments require timing. That's absolutely, I mean, that is, I was like, whoa, that was just incredible, really. And it's true. It's the real-time tweets. It's the tactics versus strategy, right? It's the campaign versus, as I would have said, enjoying the conversation, right? Marketing is a commitment, not a campaign. And so that's why I couldn't stop smiling because it's just so good. It was so good. Now, we're all looking forward to pre-ordering and pre-buying Start With Who. But you actually have written 2 other books, which is Experience the Message and Brand New World. And what I'm going to do is I will provide, in fact, I'm going to do it now. I'll put little links below in the comments. So if you want to buy these books, now that you can see what Max is about, he's gold, Jerry, gold. You can actually do that. But I want to just, continue the conversation about experiential. And before I do that, I'll create a little bit of context here on Corona TV. We do a quote. I always source a quote that I connect and match to my guests, and I try and find the right time to bring it on. So this is your quote. Provide a useful, usable, desirable, and differentiated experience, and you'll create demand for your brand and delight your customer. So do you have any idea who said that? And I just want you to know that I've been completely malicious and mischievous in terms of finding and sourcing this person.
Is it you?
It's not me, but I'll tell you it is. You mentioned a trust barometer, and it's someone who actually commented on LinkedIn that they were so excited.
Is it Dave Armano? Dave Armano?
It's David Armano. So there you go. I had to, and he's been a guest on the show as well. But this concept of experiential, right? It's taking place in the real world for the most part. But here we are living in this hybrid or this virtual world for now. So I would love to hear your vision and your thoughts for where does experiential go, both during times of COVID and post-COVID, whether that is a hybrid type of existence or whatever outcome or scenario you think is more realistic and likely to occur.
Yeah, I think the biggest fundamental thing that I would want to see occur post-COVID and during is this notion, and it kind of goes back to moment versus movement. Is this notion that experiential is tied to a physical event, and only because it seems to be for the past decade, and when I wrote Experience the Message, that was 14, 15 years ago. It was.
And by the way, I'm going to interrupt you a second. My coach Charlton said, "Experience the Message is the Bible for all the experience agencies." So just let's make sure people know that this is we're talking biblical preachings here.
That's amazing, Michael. Thank you. That's high praise because I follow Michael and he's got great stuff. It was shorthand, right? It was really easy to explain experiential 10 years ago. It was like, do you know that feeling when you walk into a concert or the bar when everything could happen and that's that feeling, right? It became super shorthandy to start thinking about experiential and brand experience as a place where a lot of people get together and have a good time, right? Or learn something or make business connections, right? It required this kind of knee-jerk shorthand reaction of, experiential, it's Salesforce, Dreamforce, it's Coachella, it's South by, it's PR stunt on Times Square. But what we've seen in so far is that what I'd like to see is the definition of experiential marketing is really marketing without medium, right? And so to create so many other kind of expressions of it that isn't just tied to the notion of lots of people getting together in one place. Example I've recently started giving to some students is the Burger King Whopper Detour that just won the North American Grand Effie, right? Which was, I think, brilliant work, and the invisibility of the tech behind it, and the tongue-in-cheek, cheekiness, of it, and everything about it. Super experiential. It's not a digital campaign. It's not a TV spot. It's really, it's an experience, right? And it's experiential, and it broke records for them, right? And you wouldn't get an Effie if it didn't move the register.
You want to explain very quickly what it was?
Sure. It's in shorthand, they created a promotional campaign where you get a Whopper within 300 feet of every geo-fenced McDonald's in the country. So, and they would just basically drive people to a McDonald's for them to order a Whopper. And once they did that, they triggered a coupon that they can go to a Whopper and get a Whopper, right? So they basically they sold Whoppers trolling McDonald's drive-thrus. It's an example of what I think about when I think about experiential marketing. When I think about a great experiential campaign, I rarely think of a concert or a B2B event, right? I think of Red Bull Stratus, right? I think of a Fearless Girl, right? Just putting a statue in the real world in front of a charging bull of a girl is experiential. Like the emotions that come out of anyone who sees it and the photos that come out of anyone who sees it is purely experience-based. So the first thing I really want to do is like stop thinking like COVID has actually, basically lifted the lid on rethinking what experiential is. And you mentioned the hybridization of experiential, and I think that'll totally continue, and it should. For years, experiential marketers have been talking about the more digital, the more physical, right? Like, hey, there's this causal effect between how our lives are becoming digital. We need an escape valve to live experiences. Maybe, right? And I don't think it's ever been proven. What has been proven right now is that experiences come in completely different formats for lots of different people. I just read of this thing that HBO did for a show where they did a Zoom tasting. It was like a coffee barista, and they invited a bunch of influencers and writers, and it was for a fictitious coffee brand. And they were like, cool. So they got the coffee, and the barista started, kind of like nosing it and telling people. And all of a sudden on the Zoom, someone ran in and kidnapped the barista. And like with a balaclava, and was just like, I'm going to get you guys, everyone who's here, you're on my list, whatever. And then a plant on the Zoom goes, hold on, there's someone at my door, and everyone on the Zoom can hear like a fight going on, right? And so tell me that whoever's on that Zoom who isn't in on the campaign isn't visceral, memorable.
Well, I love that example. But it takes us back to like the art of the heist, like with Audi, and and the fact is, just like you can be creative with anything, and I think your definition is marketing without medium. It is. I mean, I tell you, I've experienced some amazing, even in this world we're living in, Zooms late at night, generally with alcohol, but with these little breakout rooms where suddenly, first of all, there's the who am I going to end up in a room with, so there's that little bit of like spinning the wheel, but then you're in a small room with 3 or 4 people, and there's a real opportunity to network in an efficient way that is not even possible at events called conferences that we used to go to, where there's just too many people and everyone's just staring at your name tag. So there's an example of something that maybe even arguably can create a better experience.
I am super bullish. I couldn't agree more. And the UX that we're going through, for instance, when we want to go out to dinner, because of limited seating, there's a reservation app that you kind of go through, right? That like experientialists who wanted to get people to event would give their left testicle, pardon my French, would die for that kind of first engagement entry point, right? We've always wanted to do that. Or the fact of the matter that like restaurants no longer have menus, they have QR codes everywhere, right? Like for years, experientialists would be like, oh my God, if only we can get people who come through our experiences to interact with our print material or our, installations or whatever. And now you have a user experience where people are allowed to
by the way, in doing so, an opportunity to build a direct relationship with them by them opting in or signing up for or getting some kind of discount. But by the way, as I think Stephen Rubin captured this conversation beautifully. He said, biblical speaking with French conversation. There you go. We just rewrote the Bible in French. But also, Max, there's another little twist in the tale, which is the Burger King Whopper. The Burger King McDonald's war this year. Now during COVID, they came out with this campaign in the UK saying, go and buy a Big Mac. Mm-hmm. And so they almost said, let's put down our arms and let's realize, the two people walking on the trail like I was this weekend, that there's something bigger going on that actually supersedes or transcends whatever squabbles and superficiality that's plaguing us or getting us down right now. And one might argue that it wouldn't have meant as much or felt as good had they not been the protagonists and the poking the bear.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that I think the any kind of foil is amazing. If I was a creative director, and someone just basically the creative brief is just like, fuck with McDonald's, I'd be like, thank you. This is the best brief I could possibly think of, and vice versa. But I think what you're getting to and how I'm responding to it is that there's a shift in what a good piece of creative is, right? There's the shift between, a bunch of awards, and I believe it's David or whoever's behind the Burger King work. There's a bunch of kind of like approbation of wow, we're doing some really highly creative work. And then to kind of juxtapose that with, well, actually of the olive branch, right? And a kind of like an outreach or a timeout or a pause, like a mindfulness pause, right? Is just as creative as trolling them, on Twitch, right? And so they didn't think that was a worse campaign. They thought it was a good progression of one, right? And it went into a different place, which is amazing. That is also very creatively brave and courageous, in order to do that. And I love the fact that they have that ability, that self-awareness, that kind of like, intentionality, to come up with that campaign. And no one in the C-suite said that was bad. No one in the C-suite said, are you crazy?
It's also, if you think about it, it's like what I would call an Uber narrative, because the bigger narrative is it's like a series of short stories or a novel about the war between these two competitors, whether it's, West Side's, there's a story about these warring factions. And in this case, it's the time when they put down their weapons and their pitchforks and they said, you know what, let's, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And we're able to team up. And I think that, that is as experiential as, my definition, by the way, of experiential is quintessential customer centricity and utility, which is an experience transcends a feeling, it transcends transaction, it transcends functional benefit. It is truly utilitarian in terms of made a difference to my life, my who, made my life better, made me smile. And it is beautifully selfish from a customer-centric standpoint. That is experiential. Yeah,
it's a great. I love that. It's a really good reminder of the utility nature of it, right? Like the, when I wrote the first book, the first paragraph I wrote, or the thing is like, whatever the experience is, it has to have a meaningful benefit. Like if it takes you away, like I remember I was living in New York City and there was a sampling crew outside of the Bedford station in Williamsburg, putting out gum. And it was just like a log jam of people trying to get to work, getting on. And I remember it was Dentyne. Sorry, Dentyne, but I never bought them. This was 30 years ago. I was like, Mike, you took 30 seconds away. You added a little bit of stress so I can get a piece of gum on my way to work. Done. We're not working together, right? And it stayed with me, right? And and this like utility aspect. I think Joe Pine, who's the godfather of experiential, he says customer service is time well saved, and customer experience is time well spent. Right. And it's like, and it's that shifted from like, just like, oh, it got me through, and that utility into maybe inspiration or memorability or some kind of, getting out of your hedonic adaptation where you're like, oh, well, wow, that was kind of interesting, or that was kind of cool. I can't believe they did that. Right. That is like kind of that leap from what we used to think is experiential into what we think is going to be experiential, right? And that's like the time well spent element of our existence and engagement with brands, rather than time well saved.
Well, I wish we had more time, because no amount of all the time in the world would not be enough to have this wonderful conversation with you. Maiko says experiential is about connections, not leads. It's about emotions, not data. Jan Zlotnik, I've seen your questions. I hope you'll be in the after party, the after show, to ask them in person. Jan asks all these deep, profound questions, and I always try and figure out where the hell or how the hell am I going to weave them in, but I wasn't able to do that. But if you want to come and join us, Maiko, you've got to come and join us too. Come to bit.ly or go to bit.ly/Corona TV after show. And join us. We're going to be there in about 5 or 6 minutes, but we still have some work to do. It is time for our Corona question. The Corona question this week. It's a fairly obvious one, and I'm going to ask Max this question very simply. What are you thankful for?
It has to be health, right? And in this context, in the wildfire of infections that's going on right now, it's health, and primarily the health of the family. But typically I never would say that, right? I think about how the way that that you would never like think of the fact that at any moment in time you could have serious debilitating health ramifications from picking up your mail. I know that's, I know that's trite, or walking through an airport. And I never considered that before. And now I think from this year and through the next couple, I think health is going to be a huge component. And I know it is for you in terms of like the accountability that you're going through in terms of your physical, health, mental and physical. That's what I'm thankful for.
Yeah, well, I'm thankful for that too. More importantly, is I'm thankful for you today, Max. This has been a great conversation, but we have a few things to tell people about. First of all, it is not pronounced Camus like the wine, but tell people a little bit about and it's not just a zine, right? You're actually doing your part to bring back life and relevance and resonance to Experiential, which has been clearly very hard hit during this time.
Yeah, it's everything was put on hold. Like you said, B2B events, B2C events, Coachella, South by, everything, right? It's pronounced Camus, like the French philosopher.
See, there you go. French, we brought it back to France again.
All the way back, baby. And it was because I've always been influenced by his literature and existentialism in general. And one of the things that I was really impressed about by the philosophy behind it is this idea of perseverance, right? And the zine was started in the middle of a pandemic. I was reading The Plague by Camus, and I wanted a place to express a way for in a time of kind of disaster, and layoffs were happening left and right, and agencies were really struggling. I wanted a voice of hope, not to sound too maudlin and kind of weird, but to show that like there's a bigger world out there. This is a perfect time to pivot out of old business models, old ways of doing, work, the largesse of it, and really starting to reconfigure what the next 10 to 15 years of the industry could be. And I just started writing, and one thing led to another. And I, like yourself, but nowhere near the scale, started talking to people and asking them if they would like to write a piece. and really trying to elevate the conversation to a little bit more, esoteric, high level thinking rather than concentrating on what some agency did for some brand at some concert or at some golf tournament with some kind of tent, and really kind of elevate it and expand it into more, kind of heavier hitting kind of conversations around talent recruitment, around curation, around budgets, et cetera. And it's been amazing. It's a form of therapy for me, in order to get it out there. But I really hope it's like at least it's codified in the record, that there are some ideas out there for how to take this industry forward.
That's perfect. Well, I'd like to believe that Corona TV is not just a streaming show, but an experiential one as well. Having spent time with you, it is definitely something that I want to and choose to double down on. I love what you're doing with Camus. If you want to follow Max on the Insta, at Max Lenderman, same with Twitter. You can find out more about him at his, maxlenderman.com, of course. You can buy his books. You can subscribe to Camus. You can buy the T-shirt. You can drink the wine. It's pronounced. Now I'm going to actually contact the vineyard and say it's Camus. For God's sake, it's not Camus. We are going to head over to the Zoom after show. You will get to know the man a little bit more, a little bit better. You'll find out some fun facts about him. For example, as a Peace Corps volunteer, how he ate dozens of fish heads to gain the trust of a village chief. You will find out why he hates fish but has been forced to live with them. And the ultimate fishy fun fact about him, we didn't even get to it, can you believe, that we found out that he is a closeted Spurs fan. We're going to have to follow this. Let's just leave this on the screen for a while. Get your screenshots in to prove that he is in fact a Yid and a member of the Yid army. There you go. He's refusing to do that.
That's funny.
It will all be revealed in the Zoom after show. There is nothing more to be done except to tell you.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at coronatv.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.